It's an absolutely glorious day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Not only do we have some crazy new Lord of the Rings spoiler cards to talk about, but even better than that, Wizards of the Coast is making changes that are actually great for the long-term health of the game. Things are looking up, friends.
Magic.
I am a wizard.
History.
I'm an old wizard.
The Magic Historian.
My bones hurt. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for a fantastic edition of Mega Magic News. Let the good times roll. I am actually feeling optimistic about the state of Magic going forwards. So, I have a bunch of news items that I want to talk about. We're going to go through them all and we'll end off with that awesome Lord of the Rings stuff. So, first things first, you may not have heard of Acorns in April. This is a fun little event that Wizards of the Coast is doing. If you like the uncards, this is going to be for you. Wizards of the Coast is sending out 2 to 5 copies of unsanctioned box sets to all of the LGSs that are out there. And they're going to be doing special events using those where they're essentially just meant to be given away to players. So instead of getting the whole box set, each one has individual decks. So those individual decks will be taken, handed out along with some booster packs, and you get to play in a weird kind of muddled, sealed environment with a bunch of uninsanity, which seems like a lot of fun. And anything that involves Wizards of the Coast handing freebies to LGSs is A1 with me, bro. And Wizards of this isn't the big news in terms of Wizards of the Coast making changes that are good for the long-term health of the game, because we've seen this sort of stuff before, right? These little handouts here and there, they're nice. It's a little bit of icing on the cake, but the real deal is when it comes to the announcement of the return of the Magic Story podcast. Now, this is something that's subtle. You might not really understand what this represents, but this is something that Wizards of the Coast did all the way up until 2018 when they unceremoniously went whoop, and threw it along with a whole bunch of other lore stuff off to the side and said, you know what, lore doesn't matter. And actually around that time frame, 2017, 2018 is when we saw the major shift in the monetization of Magic and what mattered. We saw the push for Arena, all of that. And one of the things was the sidelining of lore. And there was actually a situation that made it worse where the War of the Spark novel was so poorly received that Wizards of the Coast went, you know what? What if we just stopped doing lore? They literally scrapped the Theros novel. They had an entire novel that they paid for that was written that we will never get to see. It will never surface in the light of day because the War of Spark novel was so bad. One example of how bad it was, it started in the middle of the story. Niv Mizzet getting taken down and then rebirthing later in the story, those are major story elements. The War of the Spark book started with Niv Mizzet already dead. You have no details, any of that. And then the next chapter starts talking about how much Teo loves toilets, right? So this was a super low point for lore, and Wizards went, okay, we're done with the story. Let's get rid of this. We're gonna throw it off to the side. Well, now the complete opposite has happened. They have announced the rebirth of the Magic podcast. This is lore specific. So understand that this isn't something that Wizards of the Coast directly makes money from, right? They don't get to actually get any sales from this podcast. You don't pay to sign up for it. They have already put out podcasts for Dominaria United and Brothers War. And we're talking multiple installments of 30-minute editions of these podcasts. Now, even if you don't care about the podcast, even if you don't care about the lore, I will explain to you why this is massively good news. Up until now, it seemed like Wizards of the Coast was straight up, cut anything that doesn't make us money immediately. It's all short term. This is something that costs them a bunch of money. They have to pay multiple employees to go through the story, make these summaries. This isn't them just reading the written stories that they put on the website. This is a recap of the story. So you'll have another option other than My Glorious Fantasy Geographic channel. If you want the Magic lore, you can get it there as well. But it shows now that Wizards of the Coast sees that there is value in things that don't immediately connect to profit. So they're not going to be able to draw a direct line from the podcast to money that they're making from it, but they see it as something that's worth spending money on for the long-term health of the game, all right? That is a major indicator to me. The lore is one of the biggest canary in the coal mine sort of scenarios because it's so easy for the corporate top level to go, nah, it doesn't matter. You know what, cut it. It doesn't make us any money. It doesn't matter. People don't care about the lore. And a lot of Magic players don't care about the lore, but a whole bunch do. And having the story underneath actually fed to us properly makes a big difference. On top of that, having a dedicated story team may also help with continuity issues too, right? So you have multiple levels, but what this really signals to me is a shift in the way that Wizards of the Coast is operating, and it's more to the long-term health of the game, because you cannot tell me that going back and making podcasts for sets that have already sold, Brothers War, Dominaria United, you can't tell me that that is going to give you short-term profit, because it's not. They've already sold those sets. It's not even Phyrexia All Will Be One. They went back with previous ones and put out hours and hours of podcasts. So for me, this is massively heartening. It's so good. I don't like watching Magic wither. I don't like constantly being talking about negative news. So today, I get to just fully enjoy myself and talk about just good times. I got more good news for you, friends. If you're in Australia, the secret layer shipping costs have been reduced by about 80 to 85%. The shipping costs for Australia were insane, right? The people in Australia and New Zealand have it rough, bro. They're out on their little islands going, hey, can we have that stuff? And they're like, yeah, sure, we'll ship it out to you, but it's going to cost a ton. So this is a nice little add-on with the good news. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're diving back in to the Hot Pocket scenario for the final time. You'll remember in the last video where I talked about the Hot Pockets, I showed the 4 different flavors and said, yo, why are they leaving blackout? Well, they're not, friends. Check it out. It's Liliana, and she's all buttered up and ready for you. Now, the other reason that I wanted to bring this up is because when it comes to these, they have these redemption codes, right? And I reported on that and what you get from the codes. But what I just learned today, and this is important, friends, if you buy these Hot Pockets, save your receipt. There is no code in the box that you go into Arena and punch in from the box. You literally have to email in a picture of your receipt or you won't get the codes. So if you're buying these and you're sitting there going, oh, I'm going to get all these codes, but you threw away your receipt, you might be in trouble. It's a minor annoyance. It's worth knowing, right? Now, let's talk about Lord of the Rings. Let's start out with the One Ring. Now, you may remember from yesterday's leak video, we were talking about, will the One Ring be a card? Will it be an emblem tempted by the ring? Well, we can see that the One Ring itself is a full-on card, and man, is it powerful. 4 mana for an indestructible legendary artifact. I love that it's indestructible. That feels absolutely right. I mean, yeah, technically you can destroy it by throwing it into Mordor, like, oh, into Mount Doom or whatever, all that kind of stuff, right? But, wait, is Mount Doom Zelda? Am I getting things switched up? Either way, you gotta go to Mordor, you gotta throw in a big old volcano or whatever. That's the deal, even if I'm saying the one from Legend of Zelda. So, the indestructibility represents that concept, flavor-wise, absolutely love it. Now, when the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. This is an interesting way to represent the invisibility effect of the One Ring, right? It's pretty difficult to give the idea of a planeswalker being invisible. How do you transmit that? Do you go, well, you can't be the target of effects because they can't see you? Or do you go, you can't be attacked by creatures? But going, you can't be targeted by anything in one way, saying that nothing can affect you because you have protection in one way is really cool from the flavored standpoint. On the other hand, it's like, there's certain things that being invisible wouldn't protect you from, but we do fall into this category of Magic where you can't always represent everything about the card perfectly. But I do like that the invisibility transfers into the concept of protection from everything, and having protection from everything is such a great feeling that even if you're not into Lord of the Rings, this is a desirable card. The next thing it says is, at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. Man, the story of the Lord of the Rings is so awesome. This unassuming little hobbit who just wants to live a calm, peaceful little life, who stands up and does like what he absolutely doesn't want to do, displays this bravery, goes on this epic quest, the ring getting heavier and heavier upon him, that all the way that it ends with him and Sam and the Brotherhood. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each of the burden counters. How does it get burden counters? From the tap ability. Put a burden counter on the One Ring. Then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. Now, what I really like about the flavor of this is the fact that the ring still harms you, whether you choose to use it or not. Once you've used this ability once you've tapped this and tapped into the power of the ring, then for now on, it's always going to eat at your brain, right? That's what that one little bit of damage is. It's the ring corrupting you, turning you slowly into a golem-like being, right? That is some super flavor. As soon as you activate it once, the pain happens every turn. So then you go, well, I mean, I'm getting hurt either way. Shouldn't I just tap into it for more power? Drawing like a card for each burden counter on it is absolutely wild. I will slap this into my cube for sure. And the artwork is exactly what you would expect it to be. It's the One Ring. I'm not sure if we're supposed to be seeing it in the moment where it's just being forged or the moment where it's being cast into the volcano flames, into the magma or whatever. I don't absolutely know here, but it definitely feels iconic Lord of the Rings style, right? Maybe they're going to have alternate versions where you can see the script flowing on it and stuff like that. Maybe they'll show somebody wearing it, because we are getting multiple versions of all kinds of different cards in this set. Let me give you an example of somebody there are multiple versions of. This is Gandalf the Grey, or Gandalf the Red and Blue. So, might feel a little bit weird to you right off the bat that Gandalf is red-blue, but just remember that red-blue are the main wizard colors in Magic the Gathering, right? So that's why he ends up there. Now, Gandalf the Grey is 1 red, 1 blue, and 3 for a 3/4. That's beefy right out the gates. Most humans are 1/1, not Gandalf. And bro, Gandalf wields a sword. How cool is that? In most fantasy we see, mages gain access to the arcane, but in exchange, they don't have ability, like in D&D specifically, they don't have the ability to use anything but tiny little like daggers or a staff. They're not allowed to wield full-on swords. But Gandalf uses an orc slaying blade, right? This is Glamdring in his hands. This is so epically cool. I am a massive Lord of the Rings fanboy. So, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, choose one that hasn't been chosen. You may tap or untap target permanent. Gandalf the Grey deals 3 damage to each opponent. Copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy, or put Gandalf on top of its owner's library. So you can only do these each once, but if Gandalf goes back to the top of your deck, or he gets removed from play and comes back into play, it resets that. So every time you get him out, you can do each of these once. Now, some of these abilities do feel underwhelming individually, tapping or untapping a permanent. You know, it's kind of like, okay, I guess that's okay to tack on. But the 3 damage to each opponent is nothing to sneeze at. Copying a spell, also nothing to sneeze at. And the fact that you can slap them on top of your deck is fun, so that you can reset them. And it also gives the vibe of Gandalf disappears and reappears in the story. Speaking of which, this alternate style is incredible. Look at this alternate Gandalf the Grey, where he's fighting the Balrog, and you've got the fire whip and everything. He's being pulled down. Oh, fly, you fools. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. The artwork is awesome. As he's plummeting downwards, and you've got like that red infernal energy from where the Balrog's hand is reaching up. And this is all done in this circular view window where you have the script from the One Ring, the elven script that will be on the ring. I believe that's what it is. Either that or it's other elven script. It looks absolutely awesome, and it captures such an epic moment in the story where, spoilers for a super old story if you didn't know, Gandalf comes back. He was originally Gandalf the Grey. He comes back as Gandalf the White, essentially almost a reincarnation of himself. There's some really cool flavor with the Wizards of the Lord of the Rings. Actually, Lord of the Rings is just baller overall for fantasy flavor. It's mega epic. Now, let's end off with the basic lands, friends. Check it out. If you didn't know, Lord of the Rings is a mono green set. That's right. Every land is a forest. Not for real. No, actually, they're all 5 types here. You got the Shire, you got Mordor, you got a bunch of cool choices, right? But they really do feel like they're all forests from the heavy amount of greenery. I do dig the map vibe, though. It looks awesome. The only thing that does feel the tiniest bit weird is the frames, right? If you look at the shininess of like the name tag and everything like that, it really does feel like it fit better on Warhammer 40K, and it feels a little bit too shiny and new for Lord of the Rings, and I feel like they should have given it a different fantasy vibe, but that's just how they do Universes Beyond. So that is a minor visual quibble. But that wraps up a super hyped installment of Mega Magic News. Man, my voice is so loud, something just fell off the shelf over there. All right, so I'm going to be doing a live stream over on my other channel. Feel free to come and hang out if you want to. Let me know what you think about these Lord of the Rings cards because I'm super, super hyped about this. Big shout out to my patrons, and I'll see you all for the next video.